Okay, everybody, welcome back to the fourth tutorial. So this one's a little bit different. We're going to do some parrots. So we'll jump right into it. Looks like we're doing a base coat. I tried 3 or 4 different colors on the base of this. Ended up with kind of a bronzed orange. So this is a yellow orange. Just acrylic, normal acrylic, no metallics. Always give it a couple coats. Second coat going on. Yellow orange. I mixed a little bit more orange into it. It wasn't quite as orange as I wanted it. There's the picture. Going back to some yellow orange, second coat. Okay, now I always do kind of everything in the background. I kind of make it a dark green. Everybody can, do what you want, but I find it easier to do a dark green. It covers quick and it seems like a little bit extra work, but do that big base coat on the bottom, and when you paint over top of it, it's easy to come fix it also if you need to mix that dark green again. Here we're doing a few little cutting those in. Painting all the background green. And I sped this, still an hour-long video, but I sped it up quite a bit. Second coat of dark green. And so we're getting a little water in this one. So I always start my water with a really dark blue, but this one I chose a blue-green because the reflection was a little green. Here we're just starting to paint the little mountains in the background. Black, do a nice black on the mountains. These mountains are really just, there's really not much detail to them. They're just something back there. So not super critical. And you'll see me once in a while take a pencil, and if you can't, sometimes they're hard to see. Basically we're painting by numbers, right? We're following the lines of the CNC Carve, and sometimes they get really hard to see, so once in a while I'll take a pencil and pencil the lines so I can see what I'm doing. That helps. So I usually always do the rocks in a gray to start with, and it's hard to even, a lot of times when you're done you can't even tell the gray anymore, but that's kind of what I used to start with. And in the picture these are really green blobs, but I went ahead and decided to make them rocks. And I changed my mind a couple times where the rocks usually actually ended on. So there you can see the rocks are painted in quick, and we jumped ahead quite a bit, and I went with like a, you can see in the palette there's a couple yellows, and then there's a dark, I actually mixed a metallic yellow with a metallic bronze and put it on the top, and it kind of gave a nice dark hue to it. So that's the one I ended up with. I was pretty happy with it, trying to match the picture a little bit. So here I'm just painting all the birds. Usually objects like these, I paint them all one base non-metallic color. Metallics are kind of funny. They don't tend to stick real well unless there's something sticky underneath them, and the stain is definitely not very sticky. So it takes a lot of, sometimes unless it's a really dark stain, it takes a lot of coats to cover. So, and it's nice to have them all the exact same color so you kind of know how one's going to respond after painting the other one. Just cutting the birds in all brown. Probably do this a couple coats. This is brown or a burnt umber. And I've seen burnt umber in 3 or 4 different shades from different manufacturers, but basically it's a darker brown. You can make your own dark umber, burnt umber if you want to. Take brown, put a little black in it, and boom, burnt umber. So here it's a little bit out of frame, but I'm starting to paint some of the flowers. And once again, if you guys have watched my videos, I section stuff off. You know, whether that's the right way or not, couldn't tell you. I have no idea if that's the right way to do it. For me, that's the easiest, to kind of section things off. So I'm going to go around and kind of try to paint everything, you know, the first starting color. And it always looks funny to start with, so all this stuff looks a little funny when you're painting it, and you're like, oh, this is just gonna look terrible. It's never gonna come out. Well, it does, but it's amazing these things can look terrible, you know, until the last 20 minutes you're painting it and start shading things, and it just all pops. So you keep that in your head. You know, some people can look at something and see how it's gonna end up, and some people, you know, need to see it as they're doing it. But have faith. It'll look good at the end, in the end. Sectioning the birds now. And I think that's a ultramarine, or probably it's a metallic, but it's not exactly, it's some dark blue metallic. And you could use whatever color you wanted to. I usually stick mostly to the pictures. Sometimes the carves won't let you do that, because you know, the picture that, if you generate a picture and you tell it to make a carve, a lot of times it doesn't exactly match the picture. So you have to kind of take a little, and I'm going to loosely call it artistic liberties, very loosely. But sometimes you have to be a little creative. And that's another place where the pencil comes in handy. Here we're just cutting it in. And I'm not being real careful except around the sky, because, and you guys, anybody's watched these before, the sky is, you know, you do that first because it's really hard to kind of smear those colors together once you painted the birds or anything else without, you know, without getting paint everywhere. That's why I paint the big colors first, because you can kind of go crazy and get good coverage and you don't have to worry about it. Still sectioning the birds. Probably could have shortened this up a little bit. I think I might have added just a little purple to this. But once this, on top of this brown, they really go on pretty easy. You know, unless you get a really light color. Like you'll see the yellows a little, it takes a few coats, but it's a whole lot easier than painting around the wood. And don't forget, everybody, that, you know, especially if you paint your sky and your water and your base green, if you can, let it dry for an hour or two at least. Overnight's better, because everything that all these little sections that we're doing, we're cutting things in, if, you know, you're either gonna have to go touch it back up, or, you know, if it's nice and dry, you can take a little paintbrush that's a little wet or something and wipe it right off right away, and you don't miss this, don't skip a beat that way. Just kind of second coating the bird. Forgot the tail feather, so I've got to paint it now. I'm being a little careful around the crest and some of the body lines. And you wouldn't have to be at this point, but, you know, I just know that you're going to have to go over it a couple times to cover it. Try to get the, you know, all the colors that happen to be on that palette right now. because the metallics dry pretty quick sitting there, so I try to, you know, double coat and get all those before I switch colors, and or at least, you know, get a different palette out or something. Use them up while they're sitting there. Even though it feels a little funny to skip around like this. And if they get too sticky, just add a little water to it. Lots of coats on these. Quick coats. Probably could have cut some of this out. Okay, so now we're cutting in some of the whites. So a new section. And here I did this is going to eventually be a white metallic, but I did another white acrylic because the white metallic is just terribly, you can see right through it. So there's the picture we're trying to do, kind of for reference. And I'll kind of leave that up there until we can see it again. Because this is, to me, this is kind of the fun part. We're going to start eventually here, start painting the birds. And I like to start with the hardest part. And I say, okay, so if I'm going to paint these birds, and if they come out all right, I know that, you know, I can rest a little bit and not worry so much how it's going to come out. Painting the flowers. It's a straight orange, believe it or not, metallic straight orange. And I'm not terribly worried about getting the, you know, it's pretty simple to paint those, and I just spread it on, and I'm not worried if it's hitting the green background or if it's perfect, because the green background is really easy to go back and touch up, and I know some of those I'm going to be painting anyway, so. And this way it brings it right down to the floor also with the background. Those will take several coats. While I have the orange out, there's some highlights there on that picture in the flowers. Lots of second coats, lots of flower painting. Went with a purple for those. Take several coats. And they look kind of icky right now. Everything looks icky until it's shaded, in my opinion anyway, and highlighted. And I usually always shade everything and then go back and, you know, put some highlights on, whether it's a white or a silver or whatever it is. And you could probably do it both ways, but I like to shade, you know, do the dark areas, and then I kind of soften the whole piece, right? You'll see me rub over everything, and you feel like, oh, that's kind of productive. You painted it all, but it softens it. You know, it really makes it look a little more realistic, and not so comic booky. Alright, here we go. We're going to get to painting some other colors on the birds. This was actually a fun one to paint. Never painted birds before, so this was kind of fun. Well, I take that back. I did paint a hummingbird scene. But it's always fun to see these, when you're painting them, it's always see them come to life. Being pretty careful on the sky. I don't want to have to fix that. I usually do almost everything with like a 1/4 inch angled brush. You'll see me use pretty much, unless I'm doing a background or, you know, a big open area, I've got a 1/4 inch angled brush or a little small detail 3-0 or 10-0 detail brush. So even though there's a bunch of brushes laying there, and a bunch of them are the same brush, just worn out. Basically use the same 2 brushes for almost everything. And that bird on the right has a lot of color in it. And I was still probably, at this point, I was still probably figuring out how I was going to do that and make it look decent, because these metallics are kind of tough to blend together, so you almost have to smear it or do it in really thin layers. Sometimes it helps to get the paint really wet, you know, not wet enough that it's, you know, it's diluted so bad that the color's not holding anymore, but just to the point of that. So the yellow, and this took 2 or 3 coats, I think, for the yellow. Some small highlights in the bottom of the feathers there. Probably could have done some different colors down there, but just trying to stick to the picture a little bit. Didn't want to stray too far from it. And the yellow and orange look quite a bit alike in this video for some reason. Here we're just putting some metallic white on top of the regular acrylic white. Second coat on the bird, on the red. Probably should darken that red just a little bit, but that's okay. You can always darken it later if you want to, but... Second coat on the yellow. And I apologize, this is so long. So I've had some people request it to see it, and it's hard to cut any of it out, even though I've sped these up about 1,000%. So here I'm just laying some really light, watered down light green on there, on top of the red, just enough so, you know, the colors kind of show through. You can always go back and give it a second coat and darken it up a little bit. So I'm just hitting it again. Another coat on the yellow on the bird. And at least they're starting to look like birds now. They're getting a lot closer. And we haven't even shadowed or highlighted or anything yet, so, or outlined, excuse me. So I've got a green and a black here. And I'm just kind of painting the rest of the things that I think should be dark green and black. So I'm letting the birds dry a little bit. I'm going to go around and give all this stuff a coat or two. And we're still dark green. So this is kind of the base color of the tree, right? Or the base color of the background grass slash whatever foliage or whatever's in the back. And if I was a little more careful when I was painting those, I'd have less cleanup to do, but that's all right. There's a lot of this kind of stuff, just takes time. Quick second coat on the palm trees. Okay, so now we're going back and looks like we're giving a quick another yellow top coat. This is probably our last coat for the yellow. And it's really starting to look good now for the yellows, really starting to pop. Little different color green on those odd colored blended feathers, and sometimes the magic is multiple colors, you know, very slight little highlights, and the small things make a big difference. A little more red on top of there. So these are all metallics at this point. All the birds are top coated with all metallics. And flowers. Flowers are metallic as well. That dark green is a regular base. And the sky is regular base, and then we did one last top coat with the orangish yellow metallic with a little bronze mixed into it. And we'll go, I think I go back and we add a little touch of brown to the sky as well. Another coat on the flowers. We're still using that metallic orange. Okay, we're doing just a little bit of yellow on those feathers, and that's where it pays to look at the picture and kind of, you know, these small little things. It's amazing, you know, how much better it makes it look, because it wasn't too bad with just the green or the red, but now we have 3 different shades of green and a little bit of yellow on top of the red. So we're getting pretty close to what the picture looks like at this point. still trying to decide, at this point, I was still trying to decide what to do with the log. Because metallic colors are tough to do. To me, wood is a tough color to find. Now, it probably would have been cool to leave it real wood underneath there, but oof, that would have been a lot of detail painting and a lot of holding your breath, and just like the frame, it would have been nice to leave that frame wood. That really would have required some better self-control on my part, but these things take enough time how it is. But you can see I added that flower on the left. That one, you know, those subtle little, another layer of kind of watered down colors on top of that blue. And I don't know what kind of flower that is. I am green thumb challenged. My wife takes me out there and says, "Hey, look at this flower. It looks like it's growing," or this is, I'm like, I have no idea what that flower is. So here we're starting to work on the eyes a little bit. I'm actually doing the lines in their cheeks, and it's kind of tough to see in the picture, but they've got these little outline lines, but they're actually a series of really small dots. So I'm doing my best to kind of duplicate that, and it turned out to be pretty challenging, getting the right amount of paint on the tip of the brush, and I end up smearing it around quite a bit, and it ended up looking pretty nice. And I actually went back and I can't remember if I pointed it out, but I actually did the eyes in a gold at the end here before it was done, and then I did put one little dot in the middle of them, and it really came out really good. And it's pretty much what the picture looks like too. It's hard to see in the picture from here. I'll go back post-production, maybe see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. So here I'm starting to do the outlines. And I basically, you know, if you look at the picture, you'll see dark shadows in, you know, all the seams, right? You'll see those, and you'll also see little outlines around things, and it may just be a thin line. It may be, you know, a wider, large, dark area. But these outlines are really important. Here we're just fixing up the picture. There was a little bit of black on the beard feathers of the bird. There you can see the picture again. You can see the little black area. And I'm giving the beak the first color coat of black. It's probably just black acrylic at the time. Just base, non-metallic. First coat. Being really careful not to get the sky black, because that may be really tough to get off. And hitting all the outlines there around the face. Little dots, little rubs. So that was so once again here with shading, I always take whatever color I'm going to shade, make that darker. So that I made, you know, it's hard to tell there, but I made the yellow quite a bit really dark. So that's what we're going to use to shade. I'll do the outlines, the thin lines, if we need it, in black. And then any shading is just whatever you're shading, just make it darker. Make it really dark. Because you will not like, if you use black shading for everything, the effects are, it just looks fake. I mean, not that this looks realistic, but you know what I mean. It looks a lot better to do dark shading of the color you're shading. And just use black. You know, whatever you're gonna, like the yellow, here we're back to straight black here. And I'm just drawing all these little outlines in. And you'll see me rubbing my finger a lot. And that kind of takes the line width down, and it you know, especially with these. That's one nice thing about these 3D carves. They're pretty forgiving when it comes to stuff like that. And it's really nice because I've got a dry metallic paint that I can, you know, wet and rub stuff around on. So you can get some nice thin lines and then look pretty natural, you know. A little smear to it makes them really look natural. Not too dark, not too light, because you don't even want to even know they're there. You just want these really subtle lines. And they really make a huge difference, just, you know, around the, you know, just wherever the colors change on the body, the black lines make all the difference in the world. Here this is actually, I took some gold just off the cap right there and painted the eyes gold. And we'll let that dry quite a while. I think last thing I do is put the eyes. This bird actually has, and unfortunately, sorry we can't see the picture, but this bird actually had a white top part of its beak with some kind of brown smudges on it. So I laid the first layer of white down because I know this can take multiple layers. Here we switched right to and it's nice because we started with a really, really dark green. So anything that, you know, whether it's the edges or things like that, it's very, very forgiving now. So we don't have to worry about getting this top piece just perfect. You know, if you wanted to just paint the face of that, you could. We don't even have to go down any of the edges. And because now we're using a lighter green, and it's actually the green we used to paint the behind there, except when we painted behind there, we made it really dark. So we're painting everything over again that is going to stand out as an actual leaf or tree part or something that's not background noise or foliage or just crap in the background that, you know, doesn't really you can't really identify what it is. We're going to leave that dark green. So, and we're painting all this, and you know, I mean, even while I'm painting it, I'm going, ugh, this just looks terrible. I don't like the way this looks together. But we've done just a tad of shading on that one bird on the left, and you can see the difference that's already making. I mean, it's amazing what a little shading could do to really make something stand out. And I apologize, I'm jumping around here, but I'm trying to, you kind of have to, you know, you either set the piece aside while you're waiting for it to dry, or you try to move to something else. And I find myself all the time sticking my hand in the wet paint and dotting it on something else and having to touch it up. But I don't have a lot of patience when it comes to waiting for paint to dry. So I usually have a couple of these going at the same time, you know, ready to paint, and I can do a base coat and switch out to the next thing and switch over to another thing, and especially if I have same colors already loaded up, ready to go. Here we're just going to rock it around and paint everything green. And I probably could have shortened this up as well, it looks like. And I sped it up quite a bit, but I could have shortened it. But I have had several people appreciate the fact that it shows me doing almost everything. Some of it jumps ahead, but most of it, I've got most of it in here. Even if it's hard to watch because it's long, but for all the oddly satisfying people out there that like to watch power washing and paint dries and lawn mowing and all those things, this is right up their alley.
Hanging on, walking tall. Some days I got no use for it all. Working hard.
And you could use 3 or 4 different colors of green if you wanted to, and you know, so you could decide that one leaf is going to be this color green and another type of leaf is going to be another color green, and you could, you know, highlight them with some yellows and orange. You could do all kinds of stuff, but I like to, you know, for speed and ease of having colors out, I like to do them all basically the same green, and then if we want to make them a little different, we do that with shadows and highlights. But that's true for most things, but not all of them. Some of the landscapes I do a little bit different, but for this kind of stuff with metallics, you know, the birds are the focal point anyway. You don't want, you know, we really don't want any of the flowers or leaves to be like, oh, that pop's the first thing your eyes go to, because you know, people are, you want them to see the birds first, and you want the rest of it to look nice, and you want it to be finished and, you know, not look like you skipped anything, but you don't want it too loud. And right now, I mean, you look at the picture and your eye goes right to the big orange little pods or whatever they call those, and the big green leaves, because they're light, you know, they're bright and they're reflective because they're metallic, so they really refract a lot of light, and it just brings your eye right to them. But when we're done, that won't be the case.
You came along and left.
Really struggled with palm trees. Wasn't sure what to do with these. So I did what I always do. Paint them green. Highlight them later. Shadow them later. Worry about it later. And see, you can see my hand laying all up over the top of that bird. You know, and the real artists, you know, they paint vertically, or this with a stand standing up vertically, and you don't have this problem. Or they have a bar. Some people lay a bar across there. Once in a great while, you might see me put a paper towel or something over that. But if that stuff wasn't dry, I'd be holding paint up, or I'd get some blue on my hand, and then the next thing I touch would get blue from that. So it's another reason why it's nice to let the colors dry. So this probably took me 4 days of in and out, you know, painting other things, and got some other CNC projects, making some cutting boards and some other stuff going on. And then I'm still working 2 days a week. So I have to go into work, unfortunately, 2 days a week. So lots of time for stuff to dry. And time to think about it. What you're going to do next, and what's the best way to approach it. Being pretty careful here around the flowers, because they're, you know, they're kind of self-edging, right? This light green self-edging the flowers that I wasn't worried about to begin with. So just being a little bit careful. Little earthquake, had a tremor. Back to the bird. So same thing on this side, except this bird actually has it, and it's tough to see right here, but this is actually, if you look at the palette, it's a brown. And this bird actually had a brown dots and lines around his face, and the other bird was black. So I, you know, and it's hard to see in the picture, but it's there. Tried to stay true to the image. And after doing the first bird, I said, okay, I need to get a really good brush out and approach this a little bit differently. You know, you'll see just a little, and it's really common sense kind of tricks, and there's, you know, and I probably learned it from watching somebody else paint, but I'll either get a little paint on there and just dab it on the palette to flatten it and takes the paint off, or I'll spin it so you can roll it on a dry spot. It's hard to see at this speed, but a lot of times I'll get some paint on it and then spin it, or I just get a single little drop and then flatten it, and that gives you a really nice clean, you know, point to work with to start. You have to reload the paint quite a bit, but it makes it easier. You don't have this big glob of paint. So here we're outlining around the face, and that's really important. And that's going to be a dark shadow spot. If you look in the picture, you can barely see it on the blue one, but those dark shadows really need a line at the bottom of the shadow, because you can't do that by shadow shading it. I mean, I can't. You need one, you know, this makes it really, shadow really works with the dark line at the bottom. A lot more detail. There's the little dots I put in their eyes. That bird on the right had a white top and a black bottom. So that's what we did. Here I'm just giving it metallic black on top. Make it shine a little bit. Another coat of white. While I had the colors out, I'm going to go ahead and paint the trunks of the trees, palm trees. Gonna be careful with those, close to the sky there. Little lines, I made just a little bitty tiny hash marks in there with a super fine detail brush. That kind of stuff makes a big difference. And if you grab a piece of paintbrush and you paint the line and it's a little bit wide or a little bit bright, just dab it with a paper towel. It'll soften it up a little bit. More tree trunks. There's some pieces that go through this, like on the corners, and there's some big pieces that come through at the bottom that are like part of the frame. It's almost like it's a lattice bamboo frame. So I wasn't quite sure what color to paint those yet, so I just kind of left them. Tree trunks, you can do, if you're doing a landscape, I always use a really dark burnt umber and then come back and do the highlights, and those always usually look pretty good. More white. Being really careful here. You can change your mind, but not your past. Every mile just feels like moving half. You can change my name in your phone. You can't leave in a town this small. Giving a little detail to the bananas. I think I just drew some really simple black lines down the middle of them and smudged them a little bit. So here we're adding some more highlights, a little bit of yellow off the cheek there. You can see yellow or orange. Now the fun stuff. So I'm going and putting all these little outlines in there, and it does take some time. There I'm making a really dark red for that. Wipe it on, wipe it, brush it, wipe it, brush it, wipe it, brush it, wipe it. You can back it up, girl, burn it all. You can't leave in a town this small. And this is probably one of the more tedious parts of it. There, giving that cheek highlight a little bit more color. You can't leave in a town this small. Yeah. A little more metallic white. Make that beak pop. Every mile just feels like moving half. You can change my name in your phone. You can't leave in a town this small. I forgot the little piece of that beak was black. Look at the picture, so I went back and fixed that. You can't leave in a town this small. We're still outlining here, so we're still drawing little black tiny lines in between the seams and any little grooves where the feathers might be. You can just look at the picture. If there's this is before I usually shade anything, so it's these little dark lines underneath the shading that that really help the shading work right. This is probably the most important part, because you gotta, that's what, to me, that's what makes these things stand out versus just painting them a color. And you can see I like playing with the Adobe Premiere, painting his feet right now. I like playing with the Adobe Premiere video transitions. You know, you gotta use them all, right? I've been an Adobe user for years. Started off on, believe it or not, doing to date myself here, back on the Mac 2 CIs. Just painting the feet. You know, and there's a lot of stuff. I thought a long time about what to do with these little claws. And at the end of the day, I just basically painted them metallic black, and that was it. And the actual, you know, I thought I was going to put some, actually was going to put some silver on the top of them for to make the light, you know, if you look at the picture, the light refract a little better. But there it was still wet, so I put a napkin, put a paper towel over there so I didn't smudge the color too bad. But yeah, at the end of the day, I left those claws just metallic black, and it worked. Just touching up the beak parts. Just a little more black. Add more lines. At rocket speed here, it's almost hard for me to follow. So here I'm just going around and I'm adding just a really light shading right now. It's just like here's a dark blue. So this, I'm getting ready to shade something here. Yeah, so if you look at the bird feathers in the picture, that's a fairly large shading of that seam. So I did a quick outline. We got a lot of outlining to do on this bird yet, but it goes pretty quick. You'd be surprised if you use the brush and wipe technique, it goes a whole lot faster than you think it will. And it looks nice and soft. It doesn't look like you just painted these hard lines in there. But the lines make a big difference. You gotta have the lines. Well, you don't have to, but I highly advise it. Be a lot happier at the end of the day if you take the time to put the little lines in. And actually, that brush and wipe method, you guys will find out if you actually try to do this, it adds some kind of natural shading into it. You know, I mean, it's without even shading it with the shading intent. The brush and wipe method for these seams adds a little bit of natural shading. Here I'm just adding some wider shading. So that's a dark red. So I'm just actually, so you can see how it's kind of, if you look at the picture, the dark areas of the bird, I'm gonna follow the picture. You don't have to understand any of the mechanics behind it or light sources or anything. Just follow the picture, and that's what I'm doing. And at the same time, I'm darkening spots that in the picture are darker, and I'm also going to soften the whole piece. That way, you know, you don't have a color that looks like it's just been put on with crayons. Shading around his beak just a little bit. They have a pretty, and here I'm pointing out they've got some funny highlights on the beaks. So I'm going to use a little silver. It's almost like a quarter band on the top. I just did a little quarter band on the top for that one. And then I just pointed to a light brown they had on the top of that beak. And that's not that, some white. But we'd add a little basically at the, right now we're not doing it, but basically I'm just touching up stuff right now. A little bit of shadow around the bird. So I'm going back to falling back to my old base brown on this log. Wasn't 100% sure exactly how I was going to like it or where it was going to end up at, but that's what I said. Okay, I know this base brown is going to cover everything, and it's going to give me a nice start for whatever else I want to do to it. Definitely could have sped past some of this. Okay, looks like we're giving it just another coat of the regular brown here. Record speed. And a little bit of color and texture to the mountains. And you can do that about 5 different ways. There I added just a small little white line for the water line break around the rocks. It's a nice touch. And added just a little bit of white to the peaks of the mountains. Here I'm just adding a little bitty, tiny bit of brown, light brown shading to the rocks. Giving the sun a little bit of color. Sometimes that takes 3 or 4 coats of just putting that on and letting it dry so it stands out. Drawing some rock lines. We're just basically going to draw some imaginary lines of where the rocks are. It's a little tough to tell, but I'm just basically doing some really thin black lines where the rock would actually be. And I made a little bit of this up. The picture has some leaves back there, which probably would have been easier to do, but I thought rocks added a nice touch. A little more of the sun while I'm there, dry a little bit. Now we're just adding a little bit of brown to the rocks. Just some dabs. Okay, the fun part, we're going to start shading these leaves. And once again, guys, gals, just follow the picture, right? Try to put darker spots where there's darker spots, and we'll highlight it when we're all done. So I just used the same green I've been using the whole time and just got really, really dark. And it takes about 8 times as much paint as you need, because I get it wet, dab it with the paper towel, to where you can almost not see paint coming off of it, because you don't want any paint on that brush. When you touch it the first time, it'll have a big spot. So we're going around and we're shading around everything. And this, it goes pretty quick, but you can look at the difference between the left and the right side already. And we're not even completely done with it, but you can see how it's starting to get softened a little bit. Makes a huge difference on the shading. Filling in a few spots here, kind of outlining it. That's why it's nice dark green. It's easy to remix and go back in and touch that up. So you can definitely tell a huge difference between the left and right here. we haven't shaded the right side yet, so it's a great opportunity to see the difference.
But the small town will stay the same.
Just touching up all the overruns with paint. And some more water reflections. Just kind of multi-layer this until it looks right. And this is such a small piece of it. I mean, we're not trying to get that exactly perfect. I went in, I added some darker, like a dark bronze. You can see it on the palette. I mixed a really dark bronze with the yellow. And these are little cloud heads that I just went in and just lightly shaded these cloud heads in. And it's subtle, but it does make it looks a little better. So here I just put a couple colors up there because I'm curious what the frame, you know, what the frame, how color I'm gonna paint the frame. And I wanted it to dry because I wanted to cut in these little florals or whatever they are that are part of the frame. Wanted to get those painted because those need to be shaded with some of the other stuff. So I said, okay, I have to decide. I had to make a decision what color I was going to paint the bamboo. And I went you can see in the palette there, it's a very diluted bronze with some yellow. So we're just cutting all these little flowers in. So that's going to be the color of the frame when we're all done. Those little flowers we just cut in. There's a little piece of that bamboo that kind of goes through the middle of the drawing like it's holding it together. So I'm just cutting that in because we want all that stuff cut in, and then we can shade it together with the other pieces. There's some little lattice down there. Wasn't sure what to do with that, so I just kind of made some little checkerboards, and it looks nice. Just another coat. Second coats are always easy. A little bit more watercolor. Some more second coats. Here looks like we're doing a little more shading. So I took the bronze deeper color, went down to a dark bronze with that. Just shaded the crap out of it. A little bit of shading up here, not a bunch, because we're going to come around and paint the frame. So here we're filling in the black holes on the leaves, just like the picture. Adding some shading to all these pieces. And sometimes I'll draw little lines, you know, where the stem of the leaf is, like the very center. Just do whatever looks best for you. Still just lots of shading. Drew some color in. There was a little something in the middle of that flower. We just put some color into it. It's hard to see on the picture, but I think we went to a yellow center with some little strings that came out. Here we're just doing some outlines in that. Getting that a little darker. Getting the shading finished on all that. And you could spend, you know, you could second guess yourself and reshade everything 50 times if you wanted to. Eventually you have to pick a stopping point. But the picture will tell you where you need to shade. So here I went, it's interesting because if you look at those leaves in the picture, they had like some yellow brownish edges on them. So that's what I did. I watered down some yellowish orange metallics, and I went back in and highlighted the edges just like they did. You know, it's a light coat, so it's semi-transparent. You can see through it, and it's just blends really nice. So it's, once again, you go back to rub, and this is after we shaded, so the highlight really stands out nice. Darkens the shade and makes it highlight a little bit, so it's kind of a twofold plus plus. But, and you can see both sides are shaded now, but look at the left side with the highlights on it versus the right side. It really, these little tiny things make a huge difference, and it takes such little amount of work. I mean, it's not tough to do at all. And it's just a, you know, dab and wipe with your finger, or get the paint nice and wet, whatever works, whatever technique you like the best. I like to work with an almost dry brush. To me, that's makes it the easiest. You know, you get paint on it and almost take it all the way off. That's the easiest for me to get these really light coats on. And angle the brush. You know, 3D carves are really nice. You can, if you angle it, you know, turn that brush almost to the side, you can just barely skim across it, and the piece will highlight itself because of the raised ridges. So you don't have to be too much of an artist. You just have to follow the lines. So instead of paint by colors, we're paint by lines or ridges. Here I'm adding just some white color to the tips of these edges of these flowers. It's hard to see from the picture, but I did add a little bit of white to the base and a little bit of white to the edges, kind of like the picture, you know, kind of like it looks in the picture. But the video's a little tough to see it in. And some white stems and some white highlights to that flower. Adding a little bit of lighting to the top of the log there. Following the picture a little bit. I'm not too worried about, you know, don't worry about making exactly like the picture. But those little details help. We're getting about, you see now we put about 6 coats on that little center sun because that's what it takes. You can't put it on heavy to start with. It won't. Just won't be able to get it done. So I'm asking, get a little white. It's a really white yellow right here. I like, you know, everybody's different, but I like making a really thin line down the middle and then spreading that line apart. Because if you try to start from the, you know, from one end, you've got such thick paint, it's hard to, you know, time you get to the end, it just doesn't work very well. So I draw just one thin line and then spread that apart as you go down, and you get a little better equal effect. So now we're going in and we're going to cut in the whole frame. I went with this bronze color. Pretty simple. It's kind of a light, it's almost like a, it's not an antique brass, it's a really light bronze. And if you had an antique, you could, you know, lighten this up from some other metallic color if you had one. But when it dries, it looks pretty good. And if we could have cut this out of maple, we could have stained it and left that natural wood or something. Will look pretty good too. but this one's actually cherry. So it's cherry with stained it dark walnut and off we went. And this is where we cover up all the wild brush strokes we made to start with. There I made a little mistake and it was all dry, so I went back with a wet brush and cleaned it right up. And I thought I sped this up plenty, and obviously I could have sped it up some more. I find it a lot easier to paint some of those lines with it held up like that. So there's the cut in. This is the roll around and paint the rest of the frame. So I'll cut that in with my little 1/4 inch angle, and then I'll go back with a 1 or 1 inch and bigger brush, and don't have to worry about getting that close now. I can just kind of be wild with the paint and throw it on. Sorry about the hat in the way. And at first I was like, oh, this frame is it's a little bit too bright, or I don't know. I didn't really like the way it looked, but I'm pretty happy with it after we shaded it. So we'll shade, and that's another thing. Once you shade everything, so about the only thing we don't shade is the sky. Everything else gets shaded. So there it's all painted. And there's some black. I just went really dark bronze, or whatever that color was. I just took it really dark. And now I'm just going around and shading it all. And we're going to shade everything. We're going to shade all those little bands. And that really looks nice. I like the way that looks. Makes a big difference, just a little bit of shading. We could have painted them a different color too, but I just randomly wipe some stuff on the outside. Try not to be too, you know, don't make it random. You don't want it to look like it was, want it to look accidental. Just adding a few more small highlights to these flowers. One flower I forgot to add some of the multicolors to. It's never too late to go back and work on it. And there we go. So this is the back of it. I always do 2 coats of lacquer or urethane if it's going outside. There's the keyholes I put in it. Second coat. Two coats on the front, and that lacquer just really makes that pop. Second coat. And there's the final piece, all finished. Doesn't look too bad. And there's the back. All came out pretty good, I think. Thanks for watching, everybody.